What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. This is a special edition of the WOOSAH podcast where I caught up with Trae Young's father, Rayford Young, and we talked about Trae and whether or not he's considering going to the NBA after Rayford gave a comment to Yahoo Sports about how he would love for Trae to think about coming back for another year when many folks, including myself, believe there's nothing else for him to prove and that he should go to the NBA. Before we get into my conversation with Rayford Young, Trae Young did Oklahoma a service. Just by going to the University of Oklahoma and choosing to play basketball there, staying not only in state, but in town, elevated the program. Elevated it in a way that you could argue Buddy Hield elevated the program, that you can argue Blake Griffin elevated the program. And it speaks volumes for how much he loves Oklahoma and loves the Sooner Nation, because this is a kid who had an opportunity to play at Kentucky, to play at Kansas, and by coming to Oklahoma, he knew that something like this could happen. He knew that just by him showing up, the team was not automatically going to end up in the Final Four. And Rayford speaks more to that point. So let's get into my conversation with Trae Young's father, Rayford Young.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
I can understand you're heartbroken. Because, I mean, it started off like gangbusters, 14-2. And then the slide that they went on. But I wondered, being so close to the situation, what was your view of the season? Like, how do you think it went?
Well, honestly, I think the season went well. I wish they could have finished a lot stronger, but I think people kind of lost sight of the big picture, and with that big picture is you have a team that went 11-20 last year. A team went 11-20, and then they add two freshmen, and then the kid Harness from Europe, and then they got as high as number 4 in the country. Now, do I think they were a number 4 team in the country? Probably not, but I think there were some expectations that people kind of got out of control. So, for them to go from 11-20 to an NCAA tournament 10 seed, I think that's an accomplishment. But, that's part of going to OU. Like, people expect big things. So
I was in that camp too, especially after seeing what your son was capable of, or is capable of doing. How do you think he handled it? It got rough there toward the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, man, it was really tough. And then, plus as a dad, it was tough to watch it. And, once again, I never want to insult anyone's intelligence, but, for the regular fan or people that are looking, if you watch this team, there was so much on his shoulders. I was talking to a NBA guy the other day, and he was telling me that he had never seen defenses geared toward a kid, especially a freshman kid, in the last 20, 25 years like it was against Trae. People can say all they want about Javon Carter. He's a great player, probably the best defensive player in the country, but he wasn't guarding Trae one-on-one. People can say all they want about, other teams, like the Alabamas and the Kansas and those type of teams, but none of these teams were guarding Trae straight up. They were either double teaming him, they were switching man. Avery Johnson even said, when they played Alabama, that he put 7 different players on them. So to answer your question, for me as a dad, it was hard to watch, but on the other side, I look at it as, they gave Trae a lot of respect by having to guard him like that.
Well, I'm going to read the quote that you gave to Pat 40 real quick and then ask you a question about it. The quote was immediately following the Oklahoma-Rhode Island game. I would love for him, your son Trae, to think about coming back and maybe being National Player of the Year next year. But it's his career, it's his life. The reason that I was kind of taken aback by that is because what we all know is he's projected to be a lottery pick, and the wisdom around everybody else is, hey, just go, man. What else do you have to prove? But it seems you think there's more to learn here.
Well, yeah. All these guys have a lot to learn. I don't know anyone that's really ready to leave after 1 year of college and go to the NBA. KD wasn't ready. He struggled as a rookie. So whenever people say, is he ready? Like, there's really no one who's really ready. But you know, when I said that after the game, you know, those are feelings that I had. Those are things that I meant to say and I wanted to say. And at the end of the day, of course, I want him to step back and just take some time off and then just think about what it would look like if he came back next year. But at the same time, I know he's got to make the best decision for him and for our family, and you know, do what he feels is right. But you know, don't just be in the moment and say, I'm leaving. You know, like, don't just come home and not think about it at all. So really, that's where my thoughts were at the time. I'm just so proud of Trae because he, you know, he said the right thing. He said how he felt, because at that time he was just really, you know, feeling for his teammates and, you know, feeling for Coach Kruger because he wanted to, you know, help Coach Kruger inch that much closer to a Hall of Fame career. But like I said, when I made that comment, I meant it, and what I meant by it is I just don't want Trae to make a hasty decision and say during the press conference, you know, this is my last game. I'm done with college basketball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the relationship with Lon, because what I like to tell people is, you know, Oklahoma is not necessarily where this kid was supposed to go. You know, he's the kind of kid that ends up at Kansas, at Kentucky, and he stayed at home to elevate the program, and he did that.
Right.
So I wonder what you think about that decision in particular, because I know that John Calipari was in your ear. I know that Bill Self was in your ear, and then the kid not only stayed, you know, in the state, he stayed in town, and what a big deal that is.
Yeah, no, it was a huge deal, and you know, this is kind of bittersweet because it's at that moment that we talked about during recruiting. You know, we sat down and said, well, if you go to Oklahoma, there may be a chance that you're not playing in the Sweet 16. There may be a chance that you're not playing in a Final Four. You know, hopefully you can go to Oklahoma and change some things and help make that happen. But there's a high chance that may not happen. So with that being said, it is kind of bittersweet because if Trae would have went to those schools, he definitely wouldn't have had the freedom that Coach Kruger gave him. So, and he definitely wouldn't have had the opportunity to go make millions of dollars and change his life forever. So you got to kind of pick, you know, the good with the bad, and you know, it's just tough to kind of explain that and talk about that because, you know, I know Trae really tried to have the best of both worlds. He really tried to help his team get to March Madness and get to a Sweet 16 and Final Four, and then achieve his own individual dream of playing at the next level. But, you know, this year it didn't work out that way.
After averaging more points and more assists than anybody else in the country, and still not earning the Wooden Award, not even being a finalist. Yeah, I mean, that in itself is just, my head exploded. But
yeah,
knowing that that's not enough, you know, I mean, what more could he have done?
Well, you know, only thing he could have done more is win a few more games. And, you know, that is so sad to me, honestly, because, you know, like Seth Davis said with CBS Sports, and I agree wholeheartedly, not just because Trae's my son, but because it's the truth. You know, the National Player of the Year and the Wooden Award is based on the full season, not just 1 month. And, you know, these kids had 1 month, or Trae had 1 month in February where he didn't win as many games. But at the same time, even though he didn't win as many games, he still averaged, you know, 23 and 7, you know, which is still better than any other player in the country. So I just think he set the bar so high that people didn't know how to really manage it or deal with it. And at the end of the day also, you know, I love Coach Kruger, and he's done so much for our family and for my son. But, you know, Coach Kruger he's not the type of coach that's going to go out there and, you know, publicize and push that agenda. And, you know, I respect him for that. And I know some of these other coaches, For instance, Coach Self got out there and talked about Devontae should be Big 12 Player of the Year, National Player of the Year, and a lot of these other coaches pushed the agenda a little bit more than what Coach Kruger did. And, I respect Coach Kruger for not having to do that, because I think the players should do it on their own and not have anybody from the program do it for them.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you about?
Well, I mean, I think everything's been good from what we've talked about. I'm just a little disappointed at the backlash of what Trae has received, here locally. I mean, it was bad enough that he's received so much of it nationally. This is something we never thought he would get, and that's, backlash, here in the state or whatever. But it's a great lesson. I think it's a great lesson for him moving forward with his career. And, those are just some of the things that he'll have to think about when he's trying to decide to, move to the next level or stay in college. But it's going to be a tough decision. And just, a couple of things he's going to be thinking about is, if he comes back and if he doesn't average 30 points and 11 assists, are people going to think that his game is not as good or he's fallen or whatever? And another thing we'll have to sit down and talk to Coach Kruger about is how we're going to adjust to, the defenses next year. What's going to happen if they continue to double team them or, play trick defenses. So, I don't know. I think everything has been good. It was a great season. Didn't end up how we wanted it to, but I mean, Trae loves Oklahoma. He loves being a college kid. I mean, he's grown up here his whole life. He's got a ton of friends here, and it's going to be a tough decision either way it goes.
That was Rayford Young, the father of Oklahoma Sooners star point guard Trae Young. If you like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes, give it 5 stars, leave a review, and if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel where we talk about Oklahoma Sooners football, basketball, college sports in general. Alright, that's it for me. Deuces.